Today, we're going to look past all the surface-level tactics of marketing funnels. We're not here to talk about, optimizing buttons or tweaking headlines. We're here to uncover something much deeper, a hidden architecture that really governs why some brands create these fanatical followings, while everyone else just gets lost in the noise. This is the architecture of story.
This quote, man, it just perfectly captures the single biggest problem that every single one of us faces online. Your potential customer isn't just distracted, they are profoundly, deeply bored. And it's not because they don't have problems that need solving. Of course they do. It's because every solution they see looks, sounds, and feels exactly the same. They're being chased by 1,000 different funnels, and their brain, as this incredible act of self-preservation, has learned to tune it all out.
And that right there, that leads us straight to the heart of the issue. It's a problem that so many people feel, but very few can actually put a name to. We call it the tactical illusion. And it's the invisible wall holding most marketing back today.
So what is this invisible wall? Well, it's this mistaken belief that a funnel is just a series of pages, a collection of technical parts that we can optimize. But that completely misunderstands what's really going on. Think about it. Your prospect isn't leaving your page because the price is a little too high or the button is the wrong color. No, they're leaving because they feel nothing. They look at the journey you've laid out for them and they just don't see themselves in it. There's no pull, no forward momentum, no reason to believe this path is their path.
And this brings us to this huge paradox in modern marketing. In our relentless quest for frictionless design, we have accidentally created momentumless stories. We've been sold this myth that people have short attention spans. They don't. People will binge an entire season of a show in one weekend. They have infinite attention for stories that grip them. The real problem is that as we optimize the tech for pure efficiency, smoother checkouts, faster pages, we often strip out the very human things that create a connection. We remove the friction, sure, but we also remove the feeling.
Okay, so the breakdown of this old tactical model, it didn't just happen overnight. It was more of a slow erosion that led to this fundamental shift in thinking, a kind of awakening across the industry.
And you can really see this shift happen in a few stages. Around the mid-2020s, we hit what you could call tactical saturation. Everybody was using the same templates, the same scripts, the same fake urgency. But, when every house on the street is painted the exact same color, none of them stand out. And that, of course, led to funnel fatigue. Audiences basically developed an immunity to the standard sales pitch. The data was becoming undeniable. Even with technically perfect funnels, conversions were just flatlining. And this crisis, it forced an evolution. It created a new discipline, the rise of the narrative architects, who knew the focus had to shift from tactics to mythology.
This was the real awakening. The industry realized that in our race to automate everything, we'd automated the humanity right out of the process. And in a world of infinite noise, the only thing that has real scarcity, the only thing that can truly cut through, is narrative weight. It's the substance, the meaning, the story behind the brand. It's the one thing AI can't fake and your competitors can't just copy. And all of a sudden, storytelling wasn't just some nice to have. It became an essential discipline for survival.
This quote just perfectly nails the philosophical shift. Marketing went from being an act of persuasion to an act of immersion. The goal was no longer to sell a solution to some external problem. The goal was to guide a person toward a resolution for their internal conflict. And that is a world of difference. It's the difference between telling people what your product does and showing them who they could become.
So if that old model is broken, what actually replaced it? Well, let's pop the hood and look at the mechanics of how these story-driven funnels really work. Because this isn't just a strategy, it's an engine. And this engine is built on a framework that is as old as time, the 3-act structure. Every great story ever told follows this pattern, and so does every great funnel. Act 1 is the disruption. This is your ad. And its job isn't to sell features. Its job is to create an inciting incident, a call to adventure that pulls your prospect out of their ordinary world. Act 2 is the struggle. This is your landing page. Here, you don't just list benefits. You show them you deeply understand their conflict. You acknowledge the obstacles, the false solutions they've already tried. And finally, Act 3, the resolution. This is the checkout, which stops being a simple transaction and becomes the story's climax, where your product is the tool that lets the hero, your customer, finally win. Now, the mechanism that holds this whole thing together is the most critical piece of all. It's what we call narrative scent. Think of it like the thematic DNA of your story. It's this consistent thread of meaning that has to connect every single touchpoint. So, for example, if your story's theme is escaping the corporate trap, then your ad can't just talk about making money.
It has to smell like freedom. The landing page has to feel like a secret map. Every email needs to read like a coded message from someone else who escaped. The second that scent breaks, the moment an email suddenly sounds like a generic corporate newsletter, the spell is broken, the immersion is gone. And this takes incredible discipline. The best brands in the world, they obsess over this, making sure that from the very first Instagram post to the final thank you page, it all feels like one single, cohesive, and compelling journey.
So when you put them side by side, the contrast is it's night and day. A tactical funnel measures page views. A narrative funnel measures emotional investment. The old goal was to manage the funnel, plug the leaks. The new goal is to own the story, to create a story so good that people need to know what happens next. One is a job of maintenance, the other is a work of art.
Okay, so we've looked at the how, but now we need to get into the really deep stuff, the psychological why. Why is this so incredibly effective on a deep neurological level?
Seriously, let's stop and think about this for a second. What is actually happening in the brain when it runs into a powerful, sequential story instead of just another sales pitch? This isn't just about what people prefer. This is about biology.
This whole architecture is built on a proven psychological principle called narrative transportation theory. And it basically describes what happens when you get lost in a good book or a movie. Our brains are literally hardwired to enter stories, to follow a narrative arc. And when we are fully transported into a story, something really fascinating happens to our brain chemistry. We experience something you could call a neural bypass effect. The prefrontal cortex, that's the part of our brain that's responsible for critical thinking, for skepticism, it literally lowers its guard. We stop analyzing and we just start experiencing. The brain actually suspends its search for reasons to say no and instead becomes laser-focused on one single thing, finding a resolution to the story's conflict. This isn't about manipulation, it's about aligning with how our brains are built to find meaning.
And working right alongside that is a second, equally powerful principle, the protagonist bias. This is our deep, almost primal need to see ourselves as the hero in the stories we engage with. And this leads to the single most important and also the most commonly broken rule of narrative marketing. Your brand is not the hero of the story. The customer is the hero. Your role is the wise guide, the mentor. You're the one who understands the hero's struggle and gives them the plan or the tool or the insight they need to win the day themselves. When you try to be the hero, you create a rival. But when you become the guide, you create an ally.
And get this, the science here is just mind-blowing. Studies show that when a person sees themselves as the protagonist in the story, their brain can release oxytocin. That's the neurochemical for trust, empathy, and connection. This one chemical reaction makes them far more likely to engage, to trust what you're saying, and to believe in the transformation you're offering. This isn't just about making a sale. It's the biological foundation of real brand loyalty.
So we've covered the theory, we've covered the psychology. Let's make this practical. How do you actually move from just building funnels to architecting these powerful narrative arcs for yourself?
Well, it really comes down to a clear three-step process. First, you have to isolate the core conflict. This means you stop asking about product features and you start asking a much deeper question. What is the real monster my customer is fighting? Is it the fear of being irrelevant, the dread of failure? Is it the anxiety of just running out of time? That is the villain of your story. Second, engineer the narrative scent. Just like we talked about, you have to pick one single powerful theme for the journey and then weave it into everything. No exceptions. And finally, you have to audit the resolution.
Ask yourself this question and be honest. When someone buys from you, does it feel like a cold, simple transaction? Just an exchange of money for goods? Or does it feel like a victory? Does it feel like the climax that the whole story has been building towards? A victory checkout page might say something like, "Congratulations, you're in." A transactional page just says, "Order confirmed." One feels like an ending, the other feels like a new beginning. The purchase has to feel like the resolution.
And this all brings us to one final, really big idea. This isn't just a new tactic. It's a completely new philosophy on what marketing is really for in our world today.
Now look, the numbers 100% back this up. The data is crystal clear that story-driven funnels lead to way higher customer lifetime value and much lower churn. That's the math behind the magic. But the math is just a reflection of a deeper human truth. The numbers are a lagging indicator. They are the effect, not the cause.
Because as humans, we are all desperate for narrative. We want to know that our struggles mean something, that there's a purpose to it all. And the very best marketing understands this. It doesn't try to force people through some rigid, mechanical process.
It pulls them toward value. It builds a narrative bridge over this huge canyon of noise and simply invites people to walk across. It's a fundamental shift from coercion to invitation, from pressure to purpose.
Because in the end, growth isn't a straight line that you push people along. It's a lesson they learn, a story they choose to live. And the greatest privilege we have as creators isn't just to sell things, but to help architect the stories that make that growth possible. To build a narrative so compelling that people don't just buy from you, they believe with you.